Order, order. I'm going to call Helen Morgan to move the motion, and then I'll call the Minister to respond. There won't be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up at the end, because that's the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Helen Morgan to move the motion.
Thank you, Dame Caroline. I beg to move that this House has considered the impact of import and export controls on the sport horse industry. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. Horses are one of the most travelled animals in the world, and in the UK we're lucky to have a thriving competition and breeding industry. And my constituency of North Shropshire is home to a significant amount of this activity in the sport horse sector, with centres of excellence for both artificial insemination of mares and competition training as well. So today, implementation of new import controls have gone live, and they have been causing consternation in the industry. And there is also an issue around export controls for live animals and germinal products, which is having a significant impact as well. So I will come on to each in turn. But I would like to note really that the issue of export controls is one for the Department for Trade and Industry and not necessarily one for DEFRA. And last week I put in this debate and they didn't want to take it. They advised that I speak to DEFRA instead. And so obviously today we're going to focus a little bit more on import controls because that is the Minister's area of expertise. But I hope that he will take some of my points about export on board and work with his colleagues in the Department for Trade and Industry to consider some of the challenges that are being faced in the industry on that side of things. So first of all, imports. So I think we all recognise there is a serious risk of disease, and biosecurity is absolutely a top priority. And I'm not here to suggest otherwise in this debate. More than 95% of sport horse mares are artificially inseminated, and they are using chilled equine semen to achieve that. And it's very important that we have checks on that so that we don't import unwanted diseases into the country. But it's important to remember that these are very high health animals. They're very carefully monitored both here and on the continent. And there's never been an incident of disease imported in this manner. And so when looking at the types of checks that might be suitable, we can take that into account and consider what is proportionate to the risk that we're talking about. And the logistical challenge of classifying these products as high risk at the border control point has the potential to cause havoc in the importing process. Now, I'm very grateful to ministers in DEFRA. The minister from the other place has held a meeting with myself and one of my constituencies impacted by this problem. And a pilot scheme is being run from today, whereby checks on those products will be carried out by the inseminating vet rather than at the border control point. And I hope that that pilot is successful, because that will remove some of the logistical problems in importing a product that you only have 48 hours to use essentially from collection. So when it's been collected in Europe, obviously it takes time to travel to the UK. The logistics of getting it out to the courier and to its destination are very, very tight. So this is a welcome development, and I thank the department for listening carefully. But it's important to note that getting to this point has been chaotic, and that change to the process has been made with only weeks to go. And I understand from speaking to the British Horse Council earlier this week that that process is being piloted at East Midlands, but not at Stansted Airport, where a smaller proportion of the goods come through. And so now we're in the situation of having a dual process, which I don't think is ideal, because there's scope for confusion and there's scope for that process to break down at Stansted. And I think it's also fair to say that businesses who are affected by this problem have wasted considerable time in getting ready and exercised a lot of worry over the potential outcome, so that the process really hasn't been ideal. I will give way.
Can I comment on relation to outlining a case, a very specific case? But we also have a specific case in Northern Ireland, and the Minister will know this, and in terms of the protocol on the winter framework that has curtailed the movement of livestock within the UK. So does the Honourable Lady agree, while her case is specific to her and her constituents, we have a specific case for us, and perhaps when the Minister is answering, he could answer how our movement of livestock, in particular horses, from Northern Ireland to the United Kingdom can be addressed as well?
Thank you very much. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention, which is, as always, highly relevant to the issue. I think there is an issue around Northern Ireland because there is a risk that with different controls we compromise our biosecurity and that people use Northern Ireland as a sort of a back door to circumventing these controls. So it's very important that we have consistency between all of the devolved nations and Northern Ireland as well. Now, this is an £8 billion industry in the UK, so we're not talking about such a niche issue here. It's well worth ensuring that it can operate effectively. So we've had a lack of clarity on charges as well. So my understanding is that both East Midlands and Stansted border control points aren't government run and that there was a lack of clarity over the level of charges. And again, it's very difficult for businesses to plan ahead for a big change that's coming in if they don't know quite what that's going to involve. And a lot of the efforts we've looked at have focused on the import of germinal products, but obviously we have stallions in this country whose products are being exported. And if we streamline and make the process of import cost effective, which is very important, we are unfortunately putting our exporters at a disadvantage to those European producers. So this is a point where I'd like to ask the Minister to work very closely with the Department for Trade and Industry to see if we can streamline that export process and put our own stallion breeders on a level playing field on that front. One of the reasons that there has been concern about the process is that vets didn't have access to the Traces system, and that's used to monitor health and travel documents in 90 countries. It's a database maintained by the EU. And I wonder if the Minister could clarify whether UK systems are going to be able to interface with that system and have been properly tested. And out of interest, why we didn't stick with the Traces system, which might have reduced some of the cost in the process of moving horses in and out of the country. So we've talked about germinal products, but I'd also like to talk about the issue around live horses. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, these animals are some of the best travelled animals in the world, and sport horses go to Europe frequently to compete. It's essential for the breeders to prove their breeding credentials and also their competition credentials. In fact, thousands of horses go every single year, and a couple of weeks ago I was very lucky to meet Saphira from Springfield Stud in Shropshire, in North Shropshire, who has been selected for the Brazilian Olympic team, but she travels backwards and forwards to Europe regularly, and it costs hundreds of pounds each time because she has to have export documentation and a veterinary check, and that process isn't streamlined and it is expensive. It's also an issue for the thoroughbred industry, which I know less about, I will confess, but thoroughbred horses have to be naturally covered, and therefore there's a lot of international movement required in that industry to ensure that there's gene pool diversity. So there's huge cost associated for that industry as well every time a horse moves in and out of the country. And there's been an estimated 18% reduction in imports of thoroughbred horses, which shows the scale of the problem and its potential impact. And there's evidence that there's a reduction in the number of European horses coming here, and UK businesses like Springfield Stud in my constituency considering moving to Northern Europe to avoid some of the cost and the red tape involved. So it's hugely damaging to the industry, and it has the potential to impact North Shropshire in particular. Just want to come back to the point that these are high health animals with continuously monitored health, and many are held in quarantine before they are used for to produce semen. They have to have high levels of documentation and accreditation to go and compete with other horses across Europe. So the risk around them is potentially quite low. And so I would really like to ask the Minister how we can slim this process down and reduce the cost and red tape involved so that those breeders stay in Britain and are able to continually effectively compete in Europe. The identification process, I am informed, is one such area where that could be improved. There are about 70 passport issuing bodies in the UK feeding into a central database, and because there are so many bodies involved, the data is inevitably of variable quality. My understanding is that the government have accepted that this needs to be simplified and improved, and the industry is waiting on the statutory instrument needed to do it, but it has been repeatedly delayed. So I wonder if the Minister could give us a date for that change coming in, so that we can see a more streamlined database for health and travel documentation. I also just want to touch on the point that the Honourable Member for Strangford made earlier about the importance of consistency. So my understanding is that Wales is set to follow the same set of rules as England, and obviously that's very welcome, but it's very important that the government works with its Scottish counterparts to ensure that we have consistency throughout the whole United Kingdom, and we don't see people trying to get through loopholes and back doors because of a lack of joined-up thinking, because that's when our biosecurity does become at risk, I think, and very important to ensure that we have the same types of controls across the whole country. So in conclusion, we have a threat to the efficient operation of a really valuable and thriving UK industry that I think we're all proud of, and I have a particular interest in it because eventing and show jumping horses are important and thriving in North Shropshire. I think DEFRA is moving in the right direction on some of these issues, but the process so far has been more chaotic than we would like it to have been. We'd like the Department for Industry and Trade to be involved as well, because horses move backwards and forwards, and we don't want to disadvantage our own breeders. Just before I finish, I'd like to thank David Mountford from the British Horse Council, Claire Shepherd from the Thoroughbred Breeders Association, and Jan Rogers of the Horse Trust for making sure I was well informed before today's debate, and also my own constituents, Tullis Matson from Stallion AI and John Chambers from Springfield Stud, for taking the time to explain their concerns and their issues to me in so much detail. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the impact of import and export controls on the sport horse industry. The Minister to respond.
Thank you, Dame Caroline. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. And can I also pay tribute to the Honourable Member for North Shropshire for securing this very important debate. I recognise the great economic, social and cultural benefits of the sport horse industry to this country, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak on the government's support for that industry here today. Turning first to the introduction of the new import controls under the border target operating model, introducing biosecurity controls on imports is not optional. Now that we've moved away from the EU's rigid biosecurity surveillance and reporting systems, we are responsible for protecting our own biosecurity from threats like foot and mouth disease, African swine fever, and of course, the African horse sickness virus, which we must remain alert to, despite it never having reached these shores. These threats could otherwise devastate UK industries and cause significant damage to the environment, to public health, and to the wider economy. We remember the impact in 2001, of course, of foot and mouth disease, which cost British businesses nearly £13 billion. That's in 2022 prices. And, of course, caused massive disruption to very many industries, including the sport horse industry. Biosecurity controls are also essential to protect our exports and international trading interests. Our trading partners want to be reassured we maintain the highest biosecurity standards, and maintaining this reputation for high biosecurity standards is, of course, in the interest of the sport horse industry to ensure that we can continue to move first-class animals with germinal products in and out of the country. Of course I give way.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and can I congratulate the Honourable Member opposite for bringing up this very important debate. I should declare my interest as a veterinary surgeon. The Minister will be aware that a couple of years ago the EFRA Select Committee published our report on movement of animals across borders, and very much there is a balance between the smooth movement of animals and protecting our biosecurity of our animals in the UK. Key issues that we looked at were trying to replicate the tripartite arrangement where there was smooth movement of high health horses between the UK, France and Ireland, and also progressing the digital identification system in horses. And both of these would allow smooth but safe movement, and actually the government progressing in these areas would help protect our industries and protect our biosecurity moving forward.
I'm grateful for this but also for his work in this area. I know he's very informed on these matters, and the House benefits a great deal from his expertise on these issues. Of course, we'll continue to work with the sector. We want to try and have as much freedom as possible in terms of movement, but do that in a way which does protect our biosecurity moving forward. And I'm sure there'll be more opportunity for us to benefit from his expertise as we find solutions to these challenges. Now, the new controls begin today, which require high-risk consignments, including equine germinal products, from the EU to enter GB via an appropriately designated border control post, where 100% documentary or 100% identity and 1 to 5% physical checks are undertaken. We are aware that the sport horse industry and their representatives, including the Honourable Lady, have been concerned about these controls coming in during the peak season of imports of equine germplasm. We've been glad of their engagement on this topic and for drawing their concerns to our attention so that we can address them and make sure that we get the implementation right. The import of equine germinal products provides genetic diversity and rapid genetic improvement for British breeding horses, and using the chilled product rather than frozen, of course, enhances those conception rates, as the Honourable Lady pointed out. We also know that the movement of these goods are highly time sensitive, and if they're to be successful, that we have to make sure that when considering appropriate measures, that works for the sector, but also make sure that we consider that when in the context of the new BTOM controls. Now, we are aware, thanks to representations from the member for North Shropshire and others, that at some import routes, logistical challenges mean some checks required by the BTOM cannot currently be undertaken within the required time frame for the products to reach their destination mare. Therefore, DEFRA officials have worked closely with the main importers of chilled equine germinal products, port health authorities and the British Equine Veterinary Association to develop and secure approval for a temporary contingency measure with an optional additional adaptation. This will facilitate trade whilst maintaining essential biosecurity controls. This contingency measure temporarily reduces the official identity checks from 100% to 20% and allows them to take place either at the BCP or at destination using the optional temporary adaptation pilot process with the BEVA, that's the British Equine Veterinary Association. In this way, these consignments, which also benefit from 100% documentary checks before arrival in the in GB, complete official import controls in the minimum time possible. Turning now to the movement of live horses, which I know the Honourable Lady was keen to address. In planning and implementing these controls, we aim to reduce any disruption or administrative burden as far as possible. And we also recognise that in the case of the sport horse industry, we can often rely on robust industry processes that are in place to assure the health of the animal. Now, for that reason, when new border controls on live animal imports come into force, we've developed and agreed with the help of industry an exemption for certain horses that meet a definition of high health. Verified equine used in racing, competition, breeding and sales can all qualify for this facilitation in arriving from the EU and Sanitary Group A countries. We estimate that approximately 2/3 of equine imports will be eligible for this exemption, and they'll be cleared for import on that basis, on the basis that a documentary check of their identity as a high health horse will be verified with the industry database. This provision will allow them to avoid attendance at a BCP for a physical inspection unless a concern is raised during the documentary check that of course triggers such an inspection. We also are focused on ensuring that the border control post infrastructure which we'll have in place for those equines that must come through one that works as well as it can do for these animals and for their requirements. And it's intended that the existing airport BCPs will be supplemented with government-run BCPs at Holyhead and Sevington in Kent, which of course will also have the additional impact of assisting those animals transferring from the island of Ireland and our friends in Northern Ireland. We're confident that we'll have sufficient infrastructure, given the planned exemption for high health horses, but we will continue to test this position over the intervening months. And we've already been fortunate to have had the benefit of the expertise within the industry to help shape the physical design of the equine facilities at Sevington, and we've made many adaptations because of that advice. This co-design will undoubtedly make the site more effective in the way in which it operates. We hope to continue that joint work to test and challenge the operational procedures at the border control post, both in the way horses travel to the site, they're handled and inspected, and we will be, of course, it will be an area of focus for our work over the coming months. In closing, Dave Caroline, we continue to welcome the open and supportive dialogue that we have with the sport horse industry. Again, I thank the Honourable Member for North Shropshire for securing this debate, and these are an important set of issues, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to discuss them.
The question is that this House has considered the impact of import and export controls on the sport horse industry. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.